We are gathered here today to give thanks for the life of Alan Joseph Pabst, husband, father, grandfather, brother, uncle, colleague, friend. We come to celebrate his life and grieve his passing, and to be open to the eternal, gracious love of God. I'm Cynthia Cochran-Carney, the pastor here at First Presbyterian Church, and the congregation here welcomes you to this time and to this service today. The Pabst are grateful for your presence here as you share your love and support for them. The journey of grief is made more bearable when we walk it together. Following the service, there will be a reception hosted by the deacons of the church. It will be out on the front patio. So please stay and enjoy refreshments. You can move the chairs around to the shade, a time to continue to share stories about Alan. We are live streaming today, so I welcome those of you who are joining us by live stream around our community and around the country. A video of this service, a recording, will be available to watch anytime on the church's YouTube channel. And for those of you who are live streaming, there is a link to the bulletin and order of service on the church website, fpcsr.org. Let us pause now and join our hearts in prayer, beginning with a moment of silence. Holy God, who gives us life, you are ever present, filling us with your love and light. Show us now your grace as we face the mystery of death. Bless this time as we remember Alan and what he meant to each one gathered here. Comfort and guide his family and friends. Open us to your love through the music, poems, stories shared, pictures, prayers, and silence. In our sadness and grief, may we know your peace. Amen. A reminder to the readers and speakers today that you can move the microphone up on the book if you're a little taller so that the microphone remains in front of you.
If one looks long enough at almost anything, looks with absolute attention at a flower, a stone, the bark of a tree, grass, snow, cloud, something like a revelation takes place. Something is given, and perhaps that something is always a reality outside the self. We are aware of God only when we cease to be aware of ourselves, not in the negative sense of denying the self, but in the sense of losing self in admiration and joy.
Ginny has chosen a poem she would like to share with us as we celebrate Alan's life. The poem by Mary Oliver is titled, Why I Wake Early. I think maybe Alan was a morning person. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the face of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star, that just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now as I start the day in happiness, in kindness.
When I began as a pastor serving here 2 years ago, there were some people I noticed. In a congregation where various groups meet, it takes a few people who are steady, attentive to detail, and committed to the larger vision of learning and friendship. One of those people was Al Pabst. He was one of the main coordinators of the men's book group. They meet every 2 weeks at 8:30 on Thursday mornings. They used to be in our church library, and then they shifted to Zoom. The caliber of the books they read struck me. Nonfiction, usually challenging, engaging current books about important topics. We list them in our e-news, in our newsletters, in our bulletins, so everyone knew about the men's book group. My sense is that Alan certainly loved discussions, lively discussions about these important topics. Ginny was telling me about Al's library at home. He loved to read. He loved great books. So it's probably no surprise to us that apparently in his at-home library, many of the shelves are 2 books thick. There's just not enough room for all the books. The men's book group has been for many, many years one of the most important ministries of this church. And by the way, I was never invited. And that's probably right. Al and Ginny, active members of this church for a long time. There are many pictures in the archives of the church of Ginny and Alan in the hiking group and at social events and after worship services. Both of them have served on our session as elders, the board of our church. Al struck me as a person who led by example and was faithful and attentive in his leadership. A church is strong and healthy when there are leaders like Alan working alongside other leaders. What I noticed in my short time here was Al and Jenny's presence at the early worship service. Pre-pandemic, we have 2 services, and we're going back to it this fall, one at 8:30 in our small chapel, and one at 10 here in the larger sanctuary. Al and Jenny came to the 8:30 quiet, contemplative service. A service of music, readings, a sermon, silence, sharing. This seemed to fit Al and Jenny. A time to connect to the mystery of the holy. A time to connect with others in the church about what is going on in our lives and what matters. I regret not getting to know Alan better. But as I listened to Jenny and their son Alan and Miranda and other people in the church, I got a glimpse of who this man was, who was beloved by his family and friends. He was so devoted to Jenny and loved Rebecca and Alan, and I can only imagine how devastating it was when Rebecca died suddenly. Jenny reminded me that after that happened, Al realized that that loss meant he wanted to quit his job, his career, and shift and be a docent at the California Academy of Sciences. He wanted to teach people about science and nature. He wanted to teach them knowledge, but also appreciation of the beauty and complexity of nature, and to be open to that wonder and awe. I know he was passionate about the outdoors, that he loved to scuba dive, he loved to travel, he loved being in the mountains. He walked every day, and he was happiest when he was outside. What a wonderful long marriage Jenny and Alan had. Some couples inspire me, and Alan and Jenny inspire me. Devotion, joy. Jenny was reflecting on their life together on Alan, and she wrote, "He was the kindest person she has ever met. He was a peaceful and thoughtful man. He was strong and steady. He did not judge others. He was generous. He was a quiet man. He listened and pondered." Those are good life lessons for all of us, to listen, to ponder, to enjoy the beauty of creation. And certainly being a grandfather was a special joy for him. I want to close by reading one of my favorite Psalms. The book of Psalms in the Bible is a collection of poems and songs of the Hebrew people. And one of the translations and versions we use of those writings in our church is by a woman named Nan Merrill. And she takes the original writing in Hebrew and makes it contemporary and gives it new life in some respects. So I want to read part of Psalm 95 that reminds me of some of the things that Alan loved. "Oh, come, let us sing to the Creator of the cosmos. Let us make a joyful song to the Beloved. Let us come to the radiant one with thanksgiving. With gratitude, let us offer our praise. For the beloved is infinite, the breathing life of all. The depths of the earth belong to this eternal love, the height of the mountains as well, and the sea and all that is within it. For the beloved is ever present, and we are blessed to be invited to friendship as companions along the way. Amen.
Hi, my name's Miranda, and Alan was my grandpa. I miss him a lot, and I didn't think it was going to be this difficult to talk to you guys, actually. But I spent 29 years and 7 months with him, and I consider myself very lucky because I have a lot of friends who didn't get to spend that much time with their grandparents. And I got to learn from him every single day. And one of the things I think that I appreciate the most is that he always wanted to share his knowledge with me and always asked me questions and picked my brain and really wanted to know what I thought about life and what I thought about myself and what I wanted in the world. And I think that had to do with who he was, which was always inquisitive and curious. And I just appreciated that every time I got a chance to talk to him about it. I learned a lot, and I don't know how I'll be able to navigate the rest of the time that I have here without being able to continue learning from him, because I really used him as a resource for expanding my own knowledge and expanding my own faith in things. More importantly, too, seeing him and my grandma made a really big difference to me growing up because they just had such a nice relationship. They were always happy to see each other, and they were always happy to be with me. And it really taught me what a marriage could be like. And it gave me something to not only look forward to, but strive for. I always used to say that I wanted to be like them when I grew up, in every sense of the word, because I think they're generous and honest and humble and very, very smart. I have a lot of memories that I enjoyed with them, but I think one of the best was when my dad and my grandpa and I went diving together, because it's something that I grew up hearing them do all the time. And then when I got the chance to share that with them, there's no words I think that I could use to describe what it felt like. And I don't think there's anything that I could use to describe what it felt like doing it with them. I valued his opinions and his wisdom more than anything else. And he always shared it with me so freely, and I don't know how I'll be able to cope with that lack now. But he always gave his love unconditionally, and that's something that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Because unconditional love is, there's no price, there's no word, there's no words to really describe how that makes you feel. It I really appreciate everyone for coming and for taking the time to spend with us. He always made me want to be a better person, and I think that's what I'll continue to do for the rest of my life, is if I ever want to look to him for help, I'll just think of what would he have recommended or what would he have said for me to do. So I think that's the greatest gift he could have given to me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jim Fairchild. I'm the nephew of my uncle Alan Pabst and my Aunt Jenny Pabst. Honored to be asked to say a few things about Uncle Al, some recollections. I'll start right in. My initial recollections of my Uncle Al were the picture of him in his Navy uniform up on the shelf in the Adirondacks where we used to visit. And all the times we overlapped with them up in the Adirondacks as well. I remember his really warm smile and all the fun we had with our cousins and Aunt Jenny up there. But as I grew older, I got to know Uncle Al and Jenny a lot better. My significant other and I moved to California to continue our educations and take advantage of University of California system. And my Uncle Al would kind of smile and say, well, as long as you're here working, and don't forget to pay your taxes. I was a quiet young man, and our many visits to San Rafael, I got to know him better as one with a bit of a sense of humor. We lived in Sacramento for several years, and he would tease us. I'd tell him stories about biking to work in 120-degree weather, and he'd look and smile and say, but it's a dry heat though, isn't it, Jim? And smile. I didn't really get that until I lived there for a few years, but yeah, it's hot no matter what the humidity is. So I'm being in my 20s. I kind of boasted of being a good bike rider and being in good shape. And, Uncle Al invited me down to be part of a bike ride down there with him. I think it was called the Cycle for Sight. And I thought, oh, great, now this will be fun. A few hills maybe. I'll probably have to go a little slower for Uncle Al. He's up there in his 50s, I think. Anyhow, the only place I actually ever saw Uncle Al was at the beginning of the race. He took off, and I know he wore a red shirt that day because I'd see a little tiny red speck off in the distance, topping the hills, going down, coming up the other side. He pasted me in that one. He was a competitor as well. Uncle Al welcomed me into the family, as did Aunt Jenny, and we visited Lake Tahoe with them, and even borrowed the condo once or twice on our own. It was quite a bit of fun. But the one memory that really sticks out in my mind is when we had moved back to the East Coast, but we came back in a hurry for Becky's memorial service. And when we got there, and pulled our car into the parking lot, into the driveway, and I got out and went to shake Uncle Al's hand, and he said, "Oh no, Jim, we're way past that." And he just gave me a really big hug. And I always appreciated that, and I always loved him for that. And anyhow, I will miss my Uncle Alan, and I will pass my time on to the next person. Thank you.
Alan Joseph Pabst Sr., but to me and my 3 siblings, he was known simply as Uncle Al. And when we were children, Uncle Al cast a slightly imposing shadow. He was tall, bearded, with a deep voice, and he wore those big hiking boots, and he lived, in California. But as we grew older and got to know him, we came to realize that he was, as my sister Jovi puts it, a big teddy bear on the inside. And my sister Jovi and I were recently swapping stories about Uncle Al, and we realized there was a common theme. Uncle Al as a teacher to our children. When in his presence, it was impossible not to feel his sense of wonderment, his intelligence, and his fascination with the natural world. Jovi recalled a trip with Jenny and Al to an aquarium in Hawaii, and how Uncle Al enthusiastically shared interesting facts and pointed out the fish as they went by with Serena and Sophia. And as Jovi recalls, looking from afar, she watched how Sophia looked up at Uncle Al and took his hand, and how they held hands the remainder of that aquarium trip, and how he never let go. I have also a vivid memory of being on a beach in Arcata, California, where my husband Jed and I lived for a month, and Ginny and Al had come up to visit, and we walked along a beach. I remember Uncle Al's pure delight in finding a bull kelp on the beach, and how he stretched it out to its full length, and showed my kids the bulb on the end and how that helped keep it afloat. And another memory of Uncle Al at the kitchen sink with my kids on either side. And he was demonstrating what happens when you mix oil and water together, and how ducks use that to keep their feathers dry. I think of his gentle and enthusiastic manner, and how we delighted in having our children soak up his knowledge and share in his wonder of the natural world. For me, he was also a teacher, but in a slightly different way. There were 2 discussions I had with him that have always stayed with me. One was when Aunt Jean and Uncle Al were visiting in Portland, Maine, and we were out having pizza. And I was heatedly arguing a point on a topic of which I cannot recall. But what I do remember is he asked me, had I considered that the opposing position actually used the very same argument I was using, only with their terms. And he basically turned my argument on its head, and he did it in such an unassuming, gentle, and non-judgmental way. And I remember feeling floored, and also that he was absolutely right. But I really respected his ability to look at the other side of the argument and to consider their approach and to weigh it in a non-reactionary way. The second example was when we were at a beach in California, one I had been to before, and I was totally dismayed that it looked totally different from the last time I had seen it. The whole landscape had changed, and I actually found it kind of unsettling. And I was really looking at it through my East Coast lens, where the landscape, at least superficially, remains, somewhat static. Again, he had a very simple statement. He said, "The beach-changing landscape is an example of the living earth." It was a simple statement, but also said in a kind of, have you considered this way of looking at it approach? And it really expanded my way of looking at the world. And I feel like this ability to offer a different perspective in a non-judgmental way, and to encourage people to look at the world with wonder and delight in the natural world, that these are actually very rare gifts. So thank you, Uncle Al, for sharing your gifts with us and our children. And we miss and love you.
I'll use the book idea. Hello, I'm Susan Bryant, a member of this church and a friend of Alan and Jenny's. I got to know Alan and Jenny over the past 20 or so years through participating in church activities, including being a church elder, Sunday afternoon hikes with a hiking group, working on church financial issues with the finance committee, and part of a couples book discussion and dinner group. I also got to know one of their favorite vacation locations when I asked for a recommendation of where to stay in Maui, which I knew they had visited often and loved. I found Alan to be wise, calm, kind, thoughtful of, and concerned about others, and super smart. He had deep values and was interested in the world around him, nature, science, politics, the economy, his family, his friends, and their families. And he had a good sense of humor. Whether in church governance or book groups, Alan was always prepared, used efficient organization skills to keep things moving, and asked questions about projects to make sure we were accomplishing what we as a group really wanted to. Particularly initially, before I got to know him better, I also found Alan to be a little scary, mostly because he was so smart. And I think it was because his grasp of financials and the long-term impact on the church was so much better than mine at the time. But this is where Alan's role as a mentor was particularly helpful. Understanding the financials as well as how and why people make decisions and how to structure things for long-term financial health. I could also depend on Alan to help explain complicated financial concepts, particularly the first time, or maybe really the first 3 or 4 times that I presented the church financials during the church annual meeting. I was always glad to see Alan sitting in the congregation and willing to help with questions if I needed him to. Bill and I have been part of a couples book discussion and dinner group with Alan, Jenny, and others. I know Alan was also part of the men's book group at church. He was an avid reader and participant and recommended books that I might not have gotten to on my own. Many were nonfiction, but he was always willing to also give suggestions on mystery novels that I loved as well. And I've read many of them. There are still a couple he recommended that I'm making my way through, the Premonition and then the Code Breaker, and both are excellent. We will miss his insight and discussion. I was the last member of the couples book group to retire, which I did last year. Alan used to joke that I needed to keep working so that someone was paying into Social Security. I see now how he structured his life in retirement as a model for how I would like to structure mine to have a full life. Time for friends, for travel, pursuing interests like science, nature, volunteering, spending time with friends and family, and staying active and engaged. And as we learned in Maui, snorkeling or diving and watching the sea turtles right off the shore of the condo.
My name is Henry Lease. Please excuse my voice today. It's somewhat gargled. But my wife, Jean, and I are delighted to be here. I do have to admit that there was one time this morning when I was feeling unusually crotchety, and that is because it had been at least 10 years since I tied a Windsor knot. It's a lost skill. We got to know Ellen and Jenny, some years ago, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, maybe it was more like 20 or 30 years ago, and we just did a lot of things together. We attended Osher lifelong learning classes. We would go out for dinner before we were in speaker series and get into a discussion about things that were going on. And of course, I was also a member of the volunteer corps at the California Academy of Sciences. Well, it became obvious to me that we shared a common interest in the natural world. We loved stories about the natural world, how things worked. And out of that grew or came to me Alan's passions for reading books. Well, he would recommend a book to me, and I would say, okay, that sounds interesting, so I would run out and beg, borrow, or steal a copy and read the book. But by that time, Alan had already recommended 3 more books for me, which reminded me of the parables of the loaves and fishes. There's one thing that hasn't been mentioned this morning, and that's his courage. We had known each other for some years before we were even aware that he was suffering from stage 4 cancer. It had been a long time. He did not want to make an issue out of it, and yet my respect for him and his courage just increased vastly when I realized that he did not want to make an issue out of it. So there was that aspect of his life which I really, really deeply appreciated. And just one other thing I'll mention. Those of you, maybe a few of you knew Dr. Bob Drews. He was a herpetologist, what would you call it? Well, he's a snake person. And he loved being with the docents. And Bob commented one day recently, he said, Alan and Ginny are the most gracious people I have ever known.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Baker, and I'm honored that Ginny invited Jackie and me to say a few words about our dear friend and traveling companion. I speak today for Jackie and me. Our friendship with Ginny and Al began nearly 40 years ago when we joined a movie group in Marin County. Over the years, we gathered in living and dining rooms to discuss many films, some with the same actors playing different roles in later films. Sometimes, if the lead in one movie was the good guy and appeared in a later film as the bad guy, it was a little disturbing. What I'm leading to is this, that over the years of our dear friendship with Al and Ginny, as we played out our roles in our travels together, we could always count on Al to play his role, the good guy. Each adventure, be it in the Swiss Alps, Antarctica, the Crested Butte, British Columbia, or the Northern Cascades, Al could be counted on to play his role, steady and unflappable, a good companion and traveler. While I would like to say that Al was a good actor, I can't because he wasn't acting. He was authentic and a good friend through and through. Even after long separations, when we gathered at an airport to start another adventure, we were always able to pick up where we left off the last time. A test of an enduring friendship is how you get along under the demands of travel to new and unknown places. We love the companionship at breakfast, on the trail, or at dinner. We treasure the memories of our times together. There were many. On one hike in the Northern Cascades, a loop trail that included a set of aptly named Horsefly Pass, Jackie and Al were attacked by horseflies the size of small helicopters. They are flesh eaters, and while Ginny and I remained immune to their assault, our spouses were not. At one point, Jackie was about to be carried off by 2 particularly aggressive flies, who grabbed Jackie by the leg. Al grabbed Jackie by the legs, pulling her back. A bit of an exaggeration, perhaps, but it does speak to how Al reacted to trying circumstances. Later, Al presented Jackie with a beekeeper's net hat, a reflection of his sense of humor and caring nature. On another hike in the Swiss Alps, I managed to lose the trail in a dense fog. having little idea where I was leading my companions. A train whistle in the distance gave me a bearing. Rather than being critical of my navigational skills, Al rewarded me with a dish of apple strudel when we reached our destination. One of the bonds that held us together were our common interests. He was adventuresome. He loved the mountains. He loved nature, learning about it and being in it. I've never seen anyone who could enjoy a meadow of wildflowers more than Al. What makes a friendship enduring? Shared interests, humility, trust, constancy, commitment, understanding, forgiveness. Al possessed all of these and more. The world needs more individuals like our dear friend Al. We will miss you.
Glassy sky like the dark and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dare to, why, oh, why can't
What wonderful, wonderful pictures. Thank you, Alan. Let's join our hearts in prayer. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for all those who have finished their race and who now rest from their labor. We are grateful for those dear to us who have died and rest in your eternal love. Today, we especially thank you for Alan Pabst. We are grateful for him, for his joy in life, his love of learning, his love for his family and friends, his kindness, his joy in the natural world. Comfort each one in their grief. May we learn from him what it means to live fully and love deeply. Amen.
The beauty of the trees, the softness of the air, the the fragrance of the grass speaks to me. The summit of the mountain, the thunder of the sky, the rhythm of the sea speaks to me. The beauty of the trees, the softness of the air, the fragrance of the grass speaks to me. The summit of the mountain, the thunder of the sky, the rhythm of the sea speaks to me. And my heart soars, and my heart soars.
Go into this day with the blessing of comfort. And may you always know that you are rooted and grounded in eternal love. Amen.